Okay, hello. I'm Rave Speed. I did the recent breakdown of the Super Outlaws 30 trailer, which turned out to be a waste of time because the English version came out like 2 days later. And I have with me.
Katsura Tsuruya. I stream Super Robot Wars, Gundam Battle Operation, occasionally Yakuza, some other stuff.
Every day.
Pretty much every day.
Okay, so we were going to do like a pilot guide, but as I was making the list, I went, oh shit, there's not much point doing that because if you don't know why skills are good, then the reason why we like a lot of pilots might not make much sense. So we both made a skill tier list separately, and now we're gonna go through and talk about it. So I'm the one who made the categories, so I divided them up into godly, where you should always, always, always want them if you can buy them, and pilots who have them I just made amazing by having them. Very good. This is mostly buyable skills or things that are nice to have but aren't god level. Good of default is stuff that you don't want to spend PP on, but it's good if a character has it natively. Then niche application is things that can be really good or can be kind of whatever, and it really depends on how you want to use them. And then the bottom tier is things that you should just straight up get rid of, even if a character has them as default skills. I think that pretty much covers everything. So, starting at the top of the godly tier, we both put attacker in here. Now, attacker is hang on, my cat's meowing for their food. Do you want to explain what attacker does for me?
Attacker is 20% final damage bonus at 130 will or higher. So attacker is pretty much necessary for bunker busting. If a unit doesn't need to participate in bunker busting, like if you are a dedicated spellcaster or if you are, a sub pilot in SRX, you probably don't need it. It's nice to have even then because it's so intensely powerful, but like if it was default on someone who doesn't know those categories, I would leave it because it's still attacker. But if you are a character who is like Kiosuke and Excellin, or anyone else who participates in big single hits, whoever you have in the R gun also, like that's the go-to skill for that, since one, it will make overcoming late game enemy armor even easier, and two, more damage means more better with bunker busting.
You don't want to put attacker on Aya so that you can use R formation with all three pilots?
I mean, sure, you can, and there are reasons to do it in the extreme case, but
Yeah, I wouldn't do that
is it
either.
that important? Like, if I were spending 80 PP on Aya, I would spend it on Trader SP Regen.
Yeah. So, I mean, we both put attacker up there just because, it's more damage is more better. So, you mentioned SP regen, so let's look at that as well, because that's also in the godly tier for both of us.
Yeah,
Actually, all of our godly tier stuff is the same. Um,
yeah, absolute consensus there.
so, SP regen is really simple. You get back 10 SP every turn, and that may not sound that amazing because it's only 10 SP and you can have like 180 by the end of the game on some pilots. But because it's every turn and the things that you cast turn by turn are often really cheap, like 5 to 15 SP, so it's worth proportionally more than it seems. And they made
Yeah.
it even cheaper in OGs compared to the Game Boy Advance versions for some reason, which I have no idea why they did that.
Possibly because it was so mandatory that everyone was
Yeah.
buying it on every unit, so they wanted to speed you to buying other things.
Yeah,
But
and OG1 isn't an easy game either. Like, it's especially rough in the OG's version because the twin unit system isn't really well thought out. But like OG1 generally is a pretty rough game. Like at first you have things that you basically need to spend SP to hit, because in the first arc you're either fighting things that are flying, or if you're on Kyosuke's route, you're fighting things that have, terrain bonuses, and then the Irrigators show up and they have just really beefy units that are also really evasive once they start playing real units and not just the AI units, so you want to be casting like every turn.
Yeah, we should touch on, after we do Concentrate, which I think we should do next, we should touch on the comparison between them, because they're both 80 points and they interact with the same thing.
Yeah. Okay, so Concentration reduces the cost of all of a character's spells to 80%, so 20% reduction. So 10 SP spell becomes 8 SP and so on and so forth. To me, the choice for this one is simple, you just get both. Because SP Regen and Concentration are made even better by having them both.
Yeah, they stack in an effective way, but for your first buy, I recommend SP Regen.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Endgame SP is about 140 to 180 per character, depending on a couple of wibbly wobbly factors. But by turn 4, SP Regen, assuming you cast like Focus or something turn 1, has already paid for itself compared to Concentration, and anything past like turn 3 or 4 is just gravy in terms of what you're getting out of it.
Yeah, it's a really powerful skill. The biggest issue that it has is that most of the characters that come with it aren't very good. So you really do have to buy it on most people.
Ones.
Yeah, they're mostly in the late bloomer category though, so...
That's true.
And I mean, you normally end OG1 before you even get into the range where late bloomer characters start to get good stat cards.
That's true.
Okay, so what's left after that? So after that we have Precognition and Genius. I think we can kind of talk about these both at the same time. These are both
inherent.
Yeah, you can't buy these. They're always inherent, and basically what they do is they make the pilot significantly better. Is the easiest way of putting it. So what is it? Genius is plus 20 to base hit evading critical rate, so the pilot just performs better all the time. We should actually mention base bonuses are different than final bonuses, which is a really weird thing. I think Super Wars is like the only series that really does this, and it's kind of annoying. So a base bonus is like factored into the calculation, so like if you add up your bonuses and your bases and their bases and so on, and you have, I don't know, say a 60% hit chance after all of that. Whereas if you have a final bonus, then you add everything up and you get your 60%, and then you add, here's your 30% final bonus to hit, and suddenly it's 90%. So final bonuses are like disproportionately powerful compared to base bonuses. But there are fairly few, it's mostly ace bonuses that give you like final bonuses.
Except for the next skill we're going to talk about. So there is that.
Yeah. So Precognition is when you're at 130 morale, so like, turn 3, or once the fight really starts, plus 30 to final evade during enemy phase, so the character becomes basically unhittable. This is actually why I think Rada is better than Garnet, because she has Precognition, and that does so much for her if you're just bringing her as a spellcaster.
She has Precognition and she has Focus, and between them, she's virtually unhittable.
Yeah, it's really dumb.
It basically depends how you want to treat your spellcaster slot.
Yeah, because you don't really have a slot for 2 spellcasters.
I mean, you do if you're me and you're a lunatic, but...
Yeah, okay, most people don't play the game like you.
Garnet is more of a, can do some niche trash clearing and bunker busting in certain circumstances and performs better if you give her decent to good unit than Radha does, but Radha will always be there to spellcast because she will never die.
Yeah, you can put Rada in a plane and just use her as a 100% spellcasting bot, and honestly, I think that's probably superior to having, like, a spellcaster who can sometimes clear things, because, especially in the late game stages, I find that you really want to have, like, your big hitters clearing up trash to generate morale more quickly.
Generally agree, but with a couple caveats. We can do that in like a pilot
Yeah,
or
okay.
unit video, though.
Yeah, okay, so Infight is the last skill that we haven't talked about, and it's a skill that was removed from pretty much every game after OG2 and OG1. In fact, I think those are the only games that have Infight and Gunfight, which is basically just because they're really, really good. But Infight is slightly better. So what Infight and Gunfight do is they boost the attack power of their required weapon by 50-ish every rank. And then at ranks 4 and 7, they give you an additional bonus. Now, the reason why we both put Infight up in Godly and Gunfight is only in Very Good is because Infight at ranks 4 and 7 gives you +1 movement. So if you have Infight 7, your unit just moves 2 more spaces, and that's insanely good. Especially because OG1 has a lot of terrain, like more terrain than any other game, I think. So being able to move...
That's correct.
Yeah.
Also is very terrainy.
Yeah, but like anyone who complains about terrain, it's like, okay, I played OG1 on GBA, like don't complain about terrain to me.
Oh yeah.
Being able to move 2 extra spaces is just amazing. Like that alone is good, and then the attack power boost is basically icing.
Yeah, Gunfight does give you range on your attacks, and in certain circumstances that will stack with other abilities in a more favorable way, but even then, the comparison ultimately favors Infight pretty significantly, especially since there's so many good W-space weapons that are melee attacks in OG1 and 2. Like, even some anti-sniper shit, like I think the Beam Chakram is melee despite having like a 7 range.
Yeah, the Kukuban's Beam Chakram is, 1 to 4 and it's melee, and in OGs it's actually fixed to the Kukuban Mark II, because in GBA you could take it off and like put it on the Alt Tyson, and it was really stupid. The what is it? The Neo Beam Chakram in OG2 is melee based, but you know, that's late game and you put it on the Alt Tyson and don't worry about it for the rest of the game, basically.
Is that our full top level consensus then?
Yeah, we're completely aligned on what goes in Godly. Because there's just, except maybe Infight, there's really no question about what skills you should be buying and what skills make pilots really, really good.
Yeah, like if someone comes with any of these, they're at minimum decent.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about Gunfight a bit, so that's in Very Good. I actually, while we were talking about it just there, I almost thought maybe I should have put this down in Good at default, but there are some characters that are really enhanced by buying Gunfight. Like Masaki, for example, which seems counterintuitive. It seems really counterintuitive until you actually look at all of his attacks, and like all of his finishes are range-based, High Familiar is ranged, Psy-Flash is ranged.
Yeah, he's functionally the game's new Gundam.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, actually, now that I think about it, because like the game plays it up like he's a melee character, and he has I actually checked this, he has a range-focused growth, despite how it looks. And so it's really easy to end up in at a point where you're like, oh, how come Masaki isn't doing very good? And it's because you've been, you know, working on his melee and buying Infight and stuff when you should have been buying a Gunfight. So I think that's
weird characters like that in OG1 especially.
Yeah, OG1 has a lot of experimental stuff that they kind of abandoned, like Yada as a character, like his character as a whole just is really weird. And I'm kind of sad they didn't come back to it later. Okay, so after that we have, did we both put, okay, so I put Prevail up in, actually no, where did I put Prevail? Oh, did I leave
You have
Prevail
it
off
as
the
good as
list?
default.
I have
put
it as good as
very
default,
good.
you have it. So do you want to explain what Prevail does, since you like
Okay,
it more
so
than me?
Prevail is as you take damage, you get higher hit, higher evade, and higher armor. For each level of Prevail, the threshold increases and the maximum bonus also increases. You start at 5% and get up to 45%. Uh, there's a whole stair-stepping curve. It's a little... So, the reason I think I'm a little higher on it than you are probably is because I've seen characters who don't start with significant amounts of it who really sing when they have it. I'm trying to think of who it is that this is really sticking out to me with.
You also get critical bonus.
Oh yeah, you do get critical bonus. I had forgotten.
It's like a lot too. At level 9, when you're at 10% HP, you get a 72% critical hit bonus.
Yeah.
And like that stacks with everything, so you can get guaranteed crits, but this isn't Fire Emblem. Crits in this game, is it, what, 20% more damage?
I
15?
think it's 30.
30% more,
It might
okay.
be more recent formats though. It's not like it's the important.
Yeah. I mean, I came to Super Robot Wars from Fire Emblem, basically, from playing the GBA games, so when I was like, it was like critical, and then it did almost no more damage, I was like, aww.
It used to be a lot better back in the older games where it increased your final damage and I think ignored a portion of armor.
Yeah, in
But it's
Alpha
just
and
got,
like Super Robot Wars 3, it's so stupid.
but it's got worse. Anyway,
Yeah,
I
I
think
don't
Russell
generally.
is one of those characters who doesn't come with significant prevail, but he is so well served by it that it helps
That's a
him
good
a
idea,
lot.
actually. I hadn't really thought about buying it on him. One of the things that is relevant too, though, is that like after you buy SP Regen and Concentration and Attacker, a lot of characters don't really have skill slots left.
Yeah, though again, Russell is a character who doesn't really need to be bunker busting, and you can put
True.
him in some fairly thick units. So it's
Although,
almost better for him to be in that pseudo spellcaster role.
although Russell's twin spell is Unison, so he can hit really, really hard, depending
That's
on who you
true.
pair him with. And sadly, it's old Unison where it only lasts for one turn instead of being OG's 2 where it lasts forever. So you just like put Shine behind and win. Yeah, so Prevail, I mean, you're right. If you, for some characters, it does make them markedly better. I generally don't like buying it, which is why it's sounding good if default for me. But I can see
Makes
that,
sense.
like, yeah, for some characters, it's definitely going to be good. So after that, let's see. You've got Hidden Away up in very good, and I've got it down in good if default.
That's again a case where it's specific for me. Buying Hidden Away for your battleship gives it a massive amount of tactical flexibility that it doesn't otherwise have. It makes it a lot easier to use your battleship to do its giant I'm 2L and have a big gun damage instead of just ambling forward slowly.
Sure, I think that's a lot more relevant on Ryusei's route, since the Hyukai actually does have a pretty beefy post-movement attack for early game, and they fall off really hard in the late game.
Yeah, I most recently played Ryusei Rune, so...
Yeah, being able to do that with the Hagane, and like what Casey is talking about, they actually nerfed it going from the GBA version to the PS2 version of the game. They made terrains a lot more important in PS2, so you could no longer have the Hagane move like 6 spaces and then fire its 2 to 8 torpedo and still do huge damage to things that are in the air, even though it had a C in the air. Instead of, its A rank for underwater, which is how it was meant to be used. So, that's like they specifically nerfed that, but it's still good, especially for the Hagane, which has like a range of like what is it, 8 on its linked cannons.
Yeah, it's 8 or 9 or something. It's very very large, and
Daitetsu is
I
really
feel
good
like I
too.
remember another couple characters with without hitting away who don't get it, who really benefit from it. I can't place it.
Aya probably would, since her strike shield have good range and her T-Link beam cannon is like huge range and is an all attack now. But the reason
Litsuni is
why it's
another
down,
character who I think benefits from it if you're doing the range 2 to 7 shotgun build with her, which is disgusting.
yeah, that's very specific though. And like if you were doing that, you'd buy hitting away on anyone you were doing it with.
Sure.
The thing about it for me is that almost every character who wants it comes with it. So, like, I don't usually want to spend points on it.
Makes sense, yeah. Again, there's a couple that don't. I use most of the builds that want it, that don't have it. So for me,
I tend to play the game more straight up, so...
Yeah, I
as opposed to
play more defensively than you do, and I am much cloudier.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see what's next. I think the other big gap in this level is that I put guard up here and you have it down in niche application.
Yeah,
so
do you want to
what guard does... Yeah, sure. So what guard does is when you're at 130 plus will, morale, it reduces all the damage that you take to 80%. And the reason that I like this so much is that you get a lot of units in this game that have barriers. And you get a lot of option parts that put barriers on units. So like the Kukubine has a barrier, the Valsion Custom has a barrier, the Jigen Scooter has a barrier, the Grungus 2 has a barrier, all of the telekinetic units have a TK field, which reduces damage. Guard, on characters that have room for it, is really good at reducing damage just far enough that it can get negated by those barriers, especially later in the game with TK fields. You know, you have a unit with a TK field on a building, so they're already taking like 60% damage from the building and guard, and then the TK field can potentially just negate the damage entirely.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. The other thing that kind of differentiates us is that I use a lot fewer Nendo users than you do in general, which is probably where that's coming from, because I see TK field less because I'm using fewer Nendo users, which means that the guard as barrier supplement comes up less for me. It does come up, which is why I have it in niche use, but...
Yeah, whereas I field pretty much every Psycho Driver that you possibly can. So that's probably part of why I rate that a lot higher. But it's especially good, like, Kusar starts with it, and in the Grungus Type 2, she can just tank things that she has no business tanking.
Yeah.
So, okay, but that makes sense. Like, if you don't use a lot of barriers, then Guard will do less for you, since you basically don't want to be being hit in the first place. It might still... Like, I would still pick it up on someone that you're going to have, like, glued into, like, the Valsion Custom or the Jigen.
Yeah, but I mean, that was Prevail, too, for me, was... Like, I just threw everything after SP Regen and concentration on Russell into things that make him thicker.
Yeah. Oh, you were actually using Russell. That surprises me.
The Valsian Custom with Russell in it is too strong to ignore.
Because you hate Russell for other reasons, so...
I do, but it's so stupid powerful and so capable of filling any gap in the stage.
Yeah, I do think it's actually worth talking about Russell specifically when we get to support defend, but before that, I have focused attacker up in very good, and you have it down, I think it's here below that? Yeah, in good if default.
Yeah.
So what Focused Attacker does is normally there's a huge penalty to damage when you're attacking into the wrong position. So if your unit is the main unit and it's attacking a sub-unit or the other way around, then there's I think it's a 50% damage penalty at base.
Yeah, I think it's 40 or 50. It's something significant.
Yeah, and Focused Attacker changes that up to 85%, so it's only a fairly negligible penalty. To me, I rate that really highly because like all attacks, all weapon attacks, map attacks are just so good in this game, where you have like so many like panels that are taken up by enemy units on the map. It's actually 2 units because they're a twin unit.
Yeah.
So being able to clear them, and especially on enemy phase, being able to respond with like Oxtongue E and do full and nearly full damage is just super useful. So I wouldn't put it any lower than very good, but how come you've got it lower?
I fundamentally agree with your analysis, but I used so few units that alls in favor of just things that could one-shot the front unit and put the back unit in the front.
Okay, yeah, that's fair too.
Then it fell off for me, like...
Yeah, that makes sense. Because, like, if you're playing like that, then you don't really need to worry about, like, all weapons and all attacks and so on. You can just plow through things.
Yeah, I would put it on people who would eventually inherit giant M13 shotguns, but other than that...
I think it's probably also worth... this is one of those ones where, like, any unit that has a map weapon is a good candidate to buy its pilot Focused Attacker, because the map penalty applies to map weapon... The attack penalty applies to map weapons as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm also not much of a map weapon user, which is another reason this is breaking down a little bit.
Whereas for me, like... Go on.
Almost every decision I make is about big single target damage. That's why I like Garnet, because she has love. That's why I use Kiosk Excel all the time. That's why I don't think about our formation as much as I think about SRX, because I just want to hit something and have it die.
Yeah, but with our formation, you can hit something and have it die 3 times in one turn, and they're all really stupidly powerful.
That's true.
Yeah, if you're doing that, I mean, I'm the type of person, like, I got Wallet Rush as almost my first trophy in OGs2, so that tells you what kind of player I am. So for me, Focused Attack is really out there, but yeah, it makes sense it's not for you. So that leaves, what is it, Telekinesis, Revenge, Predict, and Break Morale Limit. So I think Break Morale Limit is probably the quickest and easiest to talk about. It raises the maximum morale value from 150 to 170. And that's insane.
It's particularly good in OGS. It gets steadily less good game over game as they make morale less and less effective, but OGS is still a fairly old game and operates on morale is great rules.
Yeah, I just checked, and Akarosa doesn't have a calculation for morale, but morale is, like, by far and away the most noticeable thing you can do to improve your performance. It's really crazy how good it is. When I first played, like, OG1, one of the reasons that I had so much trouble with it in endgame is just because, like, nothing in the game really tells you, hey, morale is really good. And then you get to endgame and you aren't, like, casting, Spirit or Drive on turn 1, or you don't have, good setups to, like, get people gaining morale, and they just don't do any good against the enemies. It's really rough. But, like, at 150, you get a pretty significant bonus to everything. So at 170, it's just that much better. And late game, in fact, even early game in OGs, and this is something that's different from OG's PS2 to the GBA version. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think the GBA version might not have even had a break morale limit in it.
I want to say that's actually right, yeah. I'm not certain, and I can go check. but I think you're
Because there are more enemies generally in the PS2 version, because lots of panels that were, like initially they were one unit and now they're twin units, but each of the twin units counts as being shot down for morale purposes, so you gain morale much more quickly. So you can start hitting the 170 cap much faster in OGs compared to its GBA versions. And that means that break morale limit becomes relevant much earlier in the game than it does in some other games, like in Z1, for example. Like, you don't need break morale limit until like stage 20 at the earliest.
I am
Because you
confirming now
like,
that the GBA versions do not have red morale.
yeah. So that's something that you can definitely use in the PS2 versions, and it's just really strong. So that leaves, let's see, telekinesis we talked about a bit before. Do you want to do that? Or should I do that since I'm the one who actually uses them?
You can talk about it because you are the one who actually uses it.
Okay, so
Yeah.
telekinesis, or Nendo Power, or Psycho Driver, whichever you want to call it, if you've played any of the more recent games, it's basically the new type skill. Having it makes the pilot's hit and evade rates better depending on the level. It also is required to use certain weapons, only built-in weapons in this game, and that's, I think, the only units that you can actually shuffle around that have TK attacks are the Argon and the dispensed TT types, right?
I believe that's correct.
And on the Argon, it's only the Tealing Boomerang.
Wait, does the Grungas Type 2 have a TK attack?
No, oh, yes, it does. In OG2 GBA. I don't remember if it actually has that as a requirement in OGs because I just kept using GBA strats and didn't really think about it. Either way, it means that some of your units, so this is mostly characters who came from the Alpha series. In fact, I think it's only those in this game, isn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's only the characters who came from Superhero Sakusen / Alpha 1 and the SRX.
So they get a hit and evade bonus, they can use some weapons. They also, their T-Link rank is multiplied by 200 to determine how powerful the telekinetic field is. So characters with high TK levels will absorb more damage. It actually noticeably makes Ryusei a lot tankier than he seems to be once he gets the R1. Like, he's still pretty fragile, but he's not as fragile as he seems. And the SRX just has so much armor that it doesn't really care if it takes damage or not. Like, the Grungas Type 2 is a good example of a unit where you really need a Psycho Driver piloting it because most of its durability is in its telekinetic barrier. If you put, like, a non-Psycho Driver in it, then, you can't really tank as much damage as you might like with it. Yeah, it melts really fast if you put someone else in it. Tusker really loves that unit though, because like all of its attacks in robot form are melee, which solves his one issue that his range stat is absolute garbage. And the Jigen's like anti-snipe weapon is also a ranged weapon. So I just usually put him in it and not worry about it. You can also make use of it, like some characters like Leona has her Gwalion, which isn't really a great unit going to the end game, or you could put her in the Argon if you got that, or you're playing on Ryusei's route and didn't get the Gespens Mark 2S. She makes a really good pilot for the Argon because she has a really good TK level. Like, it's surprisingly good given that she's kind of like a satellite character. So, but again, like, you can't buy TK. Yeah. I mean, she gets it in the PS2 version of OG2, where she gets a specific unit and everything, and it's actually really good. Yeah, okay, so TK you can't buy. It's inherent on the alpha characters. They each have a maximum level, but it tends to be front-loaded for most characters. A few characters, it's like Kusuha, for example, it's in at high levels that it unlocks. So, unfortunately, for a lot of characters, like Rio the girl, for example, not Rio the boy, who is like godly, um, it doesn't solve the problem that she's just kind of inherently really bad, and the bonuses that it gives don't make up for it. But so it's kind of a rich get richer thing, but similar to Genius and Precognition, like it just makes characters that have it better than characters that don't, with very few exceptions.
Yeah. Late blooming Psycho Driver on late blooming stats will not be so great, but other than that,
Yeah.
it's pretty much is good, is here, is maybe
Yeah.
not as good as anything in the top tier, but it's fine.
Yeah, like I mean, think of it like Genius but worse, basically. Okay, so after that we have Predict. Do you want to talk about Predict since I've been talking for like 10 minutes?
Yeah, okay. Predict is plus 10 to final hit and evade and skill at 130 per round. Speaking of things that are genius but worse, here's more genius but worse. The fact that it's final hit and evade is a slight buff, though not significant. They're so close in what they actually end up doing that it's about the same.
Yeah, preferably, put them both on one character.
Oh yeah. That's something that I would put on a character who is obviously already quite dodgy, because it is something of a investment. It's more expensive than SP Regen and Concentrate, both of which I would consider better investments of ADPP. But like, if you're a character who already has Genius or already has Prophecy / Precognition, that ability, and you're finding that you're just barely like hitting that 40 to 50% pre-focus incoming hit rate, slap it in there. It'll be really good. It'll take you right to where you need to be unhittable, which is another thing that I tend to valorize. I am not a tanks user in general.
I think it's worth noting as well, Predict can make a lot of pilots who aren't really usable very usable, because that little edge that it gives them can often be like what tips them over, and especially if they already have another bonus like telekinesis, for example. Predict stacks really well with that.
Yeah. Or even if they just have focus as a spirit command, like that.
Yeah, then Predict is really good. Because Focus the spell is... Focus the spell is like plus 30 to final hit and evade. So with Predict, it's basically plus 40, and it only costs like 10 to 20 SP depending on who is casting it. So like, it's a huge game changer, and it lasts all turn. Focus is really, really powerful with basically any skill that gives you a bonus to hit or evade or both.
One thing you may notice at this point in the video is our fundamental agreement is that you want to stack advantages to the sky rather than try to split them. There's a couple of exceptions.
Stacking is much better.
TK is one of those where the defensive bonus and the evasion bonus are both good, and you can kind of freestyle with it. But for the most part, you are trying to get either to the point where you take 10 damage from everything, or to the point where you take 0 damage from everything.
Yeah, especially in OGs where, like, once the Irrigators show up and start deploying manned units, they start deploying like 20 twin units at a time. So you're going to get hit eventually. Unless you have, like, either insane evasion or you have so much armor and HP that it doesn't matter if you take a few hits. And speaking of that, we have... No, Revenge. And Revenge is actually kind of interesting. So in some games, revenge only works if you attack second in the battle. It's is it plus 30% to counterattack damage?
At 20.
I think it's
I think it's
20.
been 30 in some games, but it's 20 in OGS.
Yeah, so in this game, if you proc counter on the enemy phase and you attack first, then revenge still applies, which is not how it works in a lot of other games. And to me, that pushes it straight up into very good level, because previously it was kind of a whatever skill, especially because counter is a pretty common pilot skill. And so if you bought revenge, then anytime counter procced, you just weren't getting any mileage out of revenge. But in OGs, it works just fine. And with, if you have attacker and revenge and, a high enough counter level on enemy phase, you can often just defeat enemies without taking any damage or even having to risk taking damage because you can just kill them first. It's really good. But it's not like attacker level good.
Is this one of the games that has a counterattack final damage ace bonus on someone? Okay, no, that's only an OG2.
No,
okay,
Kyosuke does have a counter activation rate bonus though.
Okay, yeah. So OG2 specifically, this will stack with Slay's ace bonus of 10% counterattack final damage, which skyrockets it to godly for her specifically.
Yeah,
because
it's
doing plus 30% on enemy phase with a character who is functionally unhittable is great, because you can just park her in the middle of it and everything will die.
You do have to think a bit about revenge though, because you won't get full mileage out of it if you don't think about how the enemy AI works. Because, if you have revenge on someone but then the enemies don't attack them, it's doing nothing.
It's very true. So, do you know the quirks? I think you know them better than I do, other than a couple of weird ones that only apply when you're playing stupidly defensively.
Mostly the computer will aim to do as much damage as it can with the highest hit rate that it can, but it favors damage over hit rate, and so that's why in OG2, for example, Latuni's Fairlion tends to be such an enemy magnet, even though they have no chance of hitting her at all. Because the amount of damage they can do to it is incredibly high, and they don't weight the fact that they can't hit it as much as they do weight how much damage it does. They also really prefer trying to kill things, not to the extent of Fire Emblem AI, where it will, run like 20 people through an army to kill one person. But it does like to aim for things that it can kill.
Right.
So Revenge tends to be better on, like, frail units or units that are easy to hit and don't necessarily have the best armor, because the AI doesn't consider barriers. So you can put it on, like, on whoever's using Big Brongas 2, and they're like, oh, it's kind of paperish, we'll hit that, and then you have, like, Tasuku in it, and TK Field goes off, and he just doesn't take any damage, and then he gets counterattack boosted. It's really good.
The other thing is the enemy AI doesn't like moving in general. If it can attack without moving, it will generally do it, even if it's going to then use a post-move attack to do it. So another use case for Revenger is something that you kit out with Excel and a bunch of boosters and just shove way ahead of everything. And then, because it's in the middle of them, they'll just sit there and attack.
Yeah. And that's where, like, characters like Latuni, who's functionally unhittable, or Slay in OGs 2, really shine when combined with Revenge. So it's not, like, good all the time like Attacker is, but it doesn't have a very large skill curve. So, like, once you get used to it, you can use it to really great advantage.
So costs half as much and is always on. So, like, if you are treating the game as almost purely an enemy phase game, Revenger is fantastic.
I don't think it's really useful to do that though, because so many like requirements and skill points and so on require you to kill enemies that retreat at like 40% or whatever. So
Yeah,
I think it's important to prioritize the player phase above the enemy phase, especially in not. Go on.
I agree with caveats. If a
Yeah,
character has access to an attack like above a 5800, uh, attacker is more important. If they don't and you can't see any way to make that happen, I would say Revenger is better. Or Revenge is better.
that's true. I also tend to spend less time upgrading weapons in OG1 because the full upgrade bonuses are so good. So attacker tends to do better in that regard for me, since I'm not getting like amazing revenge kill all the time. But that's definitely a playstyle difference thing, and yet we both put it in the same tier because it's just that good. So
it's as good as attacker, but it is really fucking good.
Yeah. So down to good if default. So these are skills that we mostly didn't want to spend points on, but if a character comes with them, great. So support attack and support defend, we both put in this tier. Those let you do a follow-up attack at, it's not half damage, but it's reduced damage.
Yeah, I can't remember the coefficient. I want to say it's like 60 or 70%.
It's not as bad as wrong position attacks, but it's significant. And support defend lets you come in and defend an adjacent unit as if you had taken the defend action. It's 85 base? Okay, wow. That's really good. That's much better than most games. I should put assist attacker lower on my tier list then, because if it's 85% already, then a 15% bonus is actually not as good. Support defend is a bit weird in this game. So with support defend, you come in and defend an ally from an attack. If it would hit them, if it would miss, then you don't waste the support defend. And the defend action cuts all incoming damage in half. There aren't shields in this game, are there?
No, we do not have shield defend in the OG franchise.
Yeah, so it's only 50%. That happens before barriers come into play, though. So support defend on a barrier unit. Sorry? Oh, after image or jamming, yeah. So support defend is like disproportionately good with units that have barriers or special defense options. The problem that it has with this game specifically is that, first of all, support defend interacts kind of strangely with the twin unit system. And because of the way twins work, if your unit that you're intending to support defend someone else, so like Katina and Russell, who like exist for this purpose, if you have them in the same twin unit, then you usually won't get support defend when you need it, because the enemy twin units are just like attacking into their positions, and if the subunit is being attacked, then it can't support defend. So I think it's a bit worse in this game than it is in other games.
Would agree.
But so like I don't want to spend points on it, but for characters that have it by default, you can use it very well to make units around them much more. Like they can absorb a lot more attacks without going down, since first the enemy has to hit them, and then you get like 1 to 2 support defends, and so on. Unfortunately, I don't think anyone will by default learn more than level 2 support defend. I went through it yesterday. Yeah. So you do need to buy it yourself if you want to do more than that. Like Russell doesn't just get like support defend level 4 like he does in OGs 2, which is really funny. But it's also something that's notable with this game. So it's not the case in the OG's version of OG2, but in the PS2 version of OG1, everyone that has support attack also has support defend, and vice versa, because in OG1 GBA, they were the same skill, just support. So you sometimes get weird things, like characters that you might not think being useful for support attacking, might have support defend because that was the idea and they just had support in GBA. It does take up an extra skill slot though, so I like having them around, but on some characters you definitely like delete either support attack or support defend.
Yeah. Um, I was gonna bring that up also. Is that lists with support in OG1 tend to get really crowded really quickly, and you are looking to delete something.
So after that we have, yeah, I think a support skill is definitely like it's not delete this level of choice, but if you have to make a hard decision, then deleting support attack or support defend is probably better, since most characters only do one of those things well.
Yeah, like I can't think of anyone who really wants both.
You can do some dumb things using and the Grungust, because the Grungust is really tanky, but it also has really good weapons, like especially in its Gust Lander form, which you don't normally use, but it can make a really good support attacker.
I use
Okay,
Gust
which
Lander
most people don't
exclusively.
which most people don't normally use. Support attack can really like enhance the number of shots you get with it, and its attacks are quite powerful. It's just that like gets in fight, so you can usually just move the Grungust in robot mode into the enemies and start killing everything. So after that, so we both have assist attacker here, and I'm actually thinking that I should have put mine down further. So assist attacker is a companion skill for support attack. It raises the damage that you deal on a support attack from 85% to 100%. I mean, I would argue 75% to 100. Oh, it's 75. I think you said 85. Okay, no, 75. It's definitely worth having. Generally speaking, I think that if a character is going to be support attacking a lot, then assist attacker is a no-brainer, but a lot of characters that do that have it by default anyway, and you don't really want to spend points on it because you already want to buy SP regen and concentration and attacker, and then break morale limit, and then predict or revenge or something, so you're starting to run out of skill slots more than anything.
As skill slots go, I can't imagine buying it over attacker for the same use case. And it's really expensive for how much it does for you.
Yeah, it's not like its biggest issue, I think, is that in OGs you can't support all attacks with all attacks. In some later games you can, and that really brings down the amount of like worth that you get out of it.
Is it though?
Well, okay, so imagine if you could. Sorry?
This is a playstyle thing again. I'm just giving you
shit. Yeah, well, I mean, I'm thinking of it like this. So, like, if you have like one all-weapon attack, and then you could follow that. So you hit 4 units, like 2 twin units with one all-weapon. If you could then support attack with Excellin and hit those 4 units again, that would be incredible. And in some later games you can, but not this one. Like in later games, assist attacker is really, really good. In this one, not so much.
Where does that bring us?
Lucky, I think, is interesting because I have that down in niche application, and you have it up as good as default. You should probably mention what Lucky actually does.
Lucky is not viable. Lucky is another inherent. Sometimes it will just happen, and you will hit for full damage, crit, and be guaranteed to evade. I know Tasuku has it. I'm trying to remember
Garnet
who else has it.
Garnet has it. Thomas has it on the enemy side, which is really fun.
For a given value, yes.
Yeah. Like it's really good when you cast, like you do like, you know, a full strike or valor setup, especially with Rio, who gets valor early, and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna use Rio to be useful, and then Thomas just dodges and then crits her with Sonic Breaker and kills her.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like it because it's not very reliable. The activation rate is lucky level divided by 64, and the maximum level that it can be is like not very high. I think Garnet has it at quite a high value actually, and she's front loaded on it as well. But I think it only doesn't she only get like level 5 at most?
I think that's accurate. I think
So
it is only like a 8% chance, but when it happens, oh, no,
it's way less than that. I mean, yeah, that's true. Remember, it's lucky level divided by 64. That's the only calculation, so it's like single-digit percentage, and it's like even at level 5, it's a fraction of 1%. It's really dumb.
It is in fact 8%. 5 over 64 is 0.078.
Okay, so it's 0.8%, not 8%.
No, it's 8%. It's 8%. You have 8 over 100. 5 over 64.
Okay, I'm much worse at math than you, so I'm just going to assume that you're right. But I'm surprised that you put it up there since it's really unreliable.
It is very unreliable, but like it's... One, you're always happy to see it, and two, the two characters who have it have major deficiencies in one area of what it gives. Garnet struggles to crit, and Tasuku struggles to dodge. Unless you
that is true.
So, like,
Tasuku really doesn't... Well, actually, Tasuku does pretty well in the Type 2. Like, he has a bizarrely high evasion rate. It's much higher than you think it is because he has a good TK level. It's really just the Jigen that drags him down.
That's a fair assessment.
But I mean, I use Tasuku a lot, but I almost never use Garnet, which is probably why I put Lucky lower.
Yeah, I would agree.
Since like on Tasuku, when you see it, it's like whatever. It doesn't really change much, but for Garnet, it can be a huge deal.
Oh, the other thing. This is actually important. It is another part of why I rate it higher. If Lucky procs and you have Valor also up, you get both multipliers.
No, you don't.
Yeah,
it doesn't stack with Valor and so. No, I'm looking at the page right now.
I'm looking at the OG2 page, which may be why.
Ah, okay, no, in OGs it doesn't stack with Valor or Soul.
Okay. Yeah,
So, but it also does. Yeah. If it procs when you have Valor or Soul active, though, it doesn't consume the Valor or Soul, so like the attack after that will also be like amazing. So it's not super terrible if it goes off. Yeah, I mean, it's worse, but I mean, let's be honest, you were casting Valor or Soul because you were hitting a boss, so like having Lucky proc and getting a guaranteed evasion and a crit. And it's like the guaranteed evasion also won't consume Flash. So it kind of sets you, like it means that you don't have to cast things on the next turn, so it does have good synergy with SP regen, which is a really weird thing to say. But it kind of just occurred to me that that's actually true.
Yeah, another way in which all of the things that are weird about my playstyle trace back to Garnet.
Yeah, well, I mean, the other time that you cast Valor is before a map weapon, usually. Like, you wouldn't normally use it to clear out the trash, except in that circumstance.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense, though. So after that, what do we have? Oh, you have Fortune rated in Niche, and I have it rated in Good if Default. So, Fortune or Fortunate is really simple. All of the money earned by that pilot, so from when they destroy an enemy unit, they get 20% more money. It does stack with the bonus that you get for being an ace pilot and for having an ace bonus that provides extra money. It doesn't stack with the spirit commands that double money, and I'm pretty sure that's why you rated it lower than I did.
That's correct. That is exactly the reason that I'm not skeptical of it, but I don't consider it super great.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't buy it if it was available to buy, but units that have it are often... one of them is Kyosuke, who is a force deploy on so many maps, even on Ryusei routes, so... and he's really good at clearing out the trash. So being able to just constantly get a little bit more money every single turn, I think is really good. Especially in OG1, which uses old style mechanics, so you have to upgrade all... No, wait, in OG1 do you upgrade all weapons individually? Or did I have a horrible nightmare that that was true? Right, okay, that wasn't a horrible nightmare. It actually is like that. I loathe that so much. Even later OG's games did away with that. So, like, every little bit of money really helps. Like, money is disproportionately good in OGs compared to, like, Z1. Like OG1 and all the games before it, money is much better than in later games.
Yeah, I'll agree with that assessment.
So, yeah, I mean, not many people have it.
Because I use multiple spellcasters, that's another area where the stock goes down because I can more reliably source Bless, either because it's on them or because it's on someone else and they're not spending theirs on, trust, because Russell is here, / Garnet is here, / Rada is here. For some reason, I'm using 3 spellcasters. Or if I'm using
if you do that, then the value of like non-bless kills generally goes down since you have such ready access to double money from everything. So yeah, okay, that definitely makes sense. And I believe that just leaves, what is it, command and counter, which we both put in this tier. So counter we talked a bit about with revenge. Counter is just a flat chance of when your unit gets attacked, they attack first instead. It's
fantastic.
So the
characters with it are great. Not for everyone.
Yeah, I'm looking at the. But it's not something you really want to buy.
Yeah, it's a weird position because this is where it is. It's more good than niche. I'm always happy to see it on a unit, and it informs other buys for that unit. But how do I put this? Counter is. I like to have it on things that can secure kills reliably.
Yeah, and I mean, it's actually got a pretty fair activation rate too, because it's pilot skill minus enemy skill divided by 10, and then you add counter level divided by 16 to that. So, and you get a percentage, so it's actually fairly reliable, I think. It certainly feels that way when, Kyosuke starts leveling up and gets like counter 6 and his ace bonus gives him an extra 10% counter activation rate, and he goes first more often than the enemy does. I will say, I do think counter does have one application where you might want to buy it, and that's on... I think Katina actually has it by default, but Katina is a character who really works well with it because she's quite frail and hits like a truck. So going first and like destroying the enemy before they even get to attack is like disproportionately powerful on units like that.
Yeah, especially if you have her in the Gigan with its range 9 attack, and
yeah,
because then you can counter snipe at pretty much any distance, and she will solve the problem, because most things that have like range 8 attacks are not very thick.
Except for Barrel Lions. Actually, now that I think of it, in OGs, almost everything that's a long-range unit is really beefy, because like, Barrel Lions are really beefy, you have the weird things from OG2, which are like the top half of the Jigen, but with guns, which are only in the PS2 version.
Yeah. I wasn't thinking
the irrigators.
I was thinking of like the decently long-range weapons on like the Shadow Mirror Gaspansts.
Oh yeah, where they just straight up have slashers. No, leap slashes. Yeah, because they have a leap slasher as like their finishing move.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can really solve them. In OG1 it's not quite as good because like everything that's ranged is like the really beefy barrel lions, or it's those alligator mechs that are like mostly cannon and have beam coats.
Yeah.
God, I hate the alligators.
I also do.
OG1 is rough, but like it's mostly because all of the enemies in the second half of the game are just insanely beefy.
It's also rough because Tenzin is there, and every time he's there, it's the worst thing that's ever happened.
It's even worse with the localization patch because his dialogue is awful. Except you can understand it now. Like the first half of the game is rough, but it feels like strategically rough because the terrain is working against you, or the enemies can fly, and even in the story, like the fact that the DC just released all of these flying units, and that's the reason why they're curb stomping, the EFF, which is full of ground-based units. It makes sense that it's kind of an uphill battle for you, and then you get to the second half, and it's just, everything is thick, and you can't do anything about it except hit them harder.
Yeah. Okay, so Command, right? Command is up next?
Yeah. So, do you want to talk about that one? Because I think you probably use it better than I do.
So Command gives a bonus to allies in evade with proximity to the commander. It's a leveling ability. It goes, I think, 1 to 4 in OG. Usually it's 1 to 4. So there's a few things. One, it doesn't stack. You get only one command per square,
but it does use the highest command.
Yeah. The other thing, I can't remember if OGS is a game where this is true or not. It does get more effective in some games if you are closer to the commanding unit.
Yeah, it works like that in OGs as well. So at level 4, it's 25% at range 1, and then it falls off by 5% each range up to range 5. If you're in a twin unit, you actually get a slight bonus. With a twin unit at level 4, the unit that is in the twin with you, with the unit that has command, gets a 30% bonus, which is actually pretty significant. I didn't realize it was that high. That actually makes Kyosuke much better with, that he has command than I thought. Since he can twin someone who is, not necessarily that great, like Yada, and give Yada a 30% bonus.
Yeah. Man,
I should try that now, because, Yada has hit and away, right? So he can, hit something with a long-range melee attack and then kind of bounce in, and but that leaves him as the main unit, but then with Kyosuke as the sub-unit giving him 30% hit and evade, that's enormous.
Yeah, that's actually very good. I hadn't even thought
I gotta try that.
But
I probably only thought of it because I used the Alt Ison for counter, and it's right next to command in both of our tier lists.
That makes sense. One of the things that makes... Okay, so Commander actually increases the value of hit and away for me, because one of the things that I really like doing is attacking with my battleships because they hit really hard. But you don't get to move your battleship if you attack with it. Except for now you do, because you have hit and away. So you can take your battleship and put it in a place where it can now spray command to everyone after getting its big single hit.
Yeah, that's massively more useful on Ryusei route as well, because the Hagane doesn't have a good post-movement option, outside of the water anymore, but Daitetsu has really high command, whereas Lufina has lower command, but the Hyukai is kind of more mobile in general.
Yeah. It works equally well for different reasons.
Yeah. I mean, you want that in the thick of things anyway, so... then I think the last thing... No, wait, we talked about focused attacker already, so I think we're on to the niche application stuff now.
Yep.
So niche application, kind of, like, I put this stuff here... Well, I put it below good at default because it's not, like, unquestionably good, but lots of stuff in here is, like, on the level of very good, but only in specific situations.
Right, which is why I had guard down here, for instance.
Yeah. Whereas for me, like, half of my squad meets the, like, rationale for me using guards, so it's way up there. Yeah, so B-save and E-save are really simple. Basically, they let you attack more, is the easiest way of putting it.
Without resupply going back into the match.
Yeah, so B-save gives you an extra 50% more ammo for every weapon in this quote that uses ammo, and E-save reduces the energy cost of weapons and attacks by 30%, so it's 270% round down. This is one of those things where it's like, if you have a unit that almost exclusively uses one kind of resource, then you should buy that skill on them if you possibly can. Like, if you put B-save on Kyosuke, for example, then, you know, the revolving stake, something has 9 ammo, and Heavy Claymore has 6 ammo. It makes them much more usable.
I'm going to apply a caveat here, which is that I think of the two, B-save is the more useful. Like, I would prioritize buying B-save for a character who is mostly going to be using ammo weapons. I would prioritize other things over E-save fairly substantially, even if something is using mostly energy attacks. I think it's just...
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, because... Especially because it can increase how much energy you can have, and you can upgrade energy directly, but the only way to increase something's ammo count is, like, some full upgrade bonuses.
Right. There's also more ways in the power parts area to fix energy.
Yeah. Like you can
put solar panel or any of the 8 million generator parts. All of those will fix your EN problems.
Whereas you have to... Yeah, B-save, it, like, helps you with things that don't use energy. So it's definitely the better of the two, but it's really a matter of which unit the pilot is using that will decide which one you get them. A lot of... one thing that I do think is really important about E-save, though, a lot of units are in... Like, when they're, you know, fully upgraded, are in a range where if you have E-save, they can use their finisher one more time in a map. And late game, that can be... Like, that can make the difference between restarting a stage or not.
That's definitely true.
Especially against, like, Ingram, when he brings out the Argon Rivale on, like, in the late game maps. Like, that has such high HP regen that it can just end your game.
Yeah, I've had to hard reset solely because I could not hit with enough bunker busters.
Yeah,
but
so E-save will help you there.
The converse of this, and the reason that it didn't occur to me as much, is that if you have more spellcasters, you also have more casts of resupply.
Yeah.
Which is better for EN units in this particular use case.
Yeah, and especially in OGs, it's much easier to field, like, additional spellcasters, because, like, you get extra units. I think you actually get a couple of extra deploy slots compared to GBA on the later maps because of the twin unit mechanic.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah. But...
And some of them are very good and have resupply, like I am.
Yeah. I will say one place where E-save really shines is with the SRX or Ryusei's route. If you give Ryusei and Rai and Aya E-save, then you can spam R formation and then go into the SRX and use its finisher, and then you just resupply that, and everyone has full EN again. So then, you know, if Ryusei casts Zeal or you have someone cast Enable, you just do it again. And E-save lets you do that so much more readily.
I had not considered making 6 separate
And you broke up a bit there. Do you want to say that again?
I had not considered making 6 separate R formation attacks.
Oh yeah, no, you can do that. That's like the whole thing that SRX is good about in OG1. Especially because Rai and Aya have like uncommonly high SP. Like in Aya's case, it's but like the only thing that she's good at. But Rai is a good pilot and has uncommonly high SP, so you can get off like multiple valid like R formations and then have like a valid H2E blade. It's really dumb. So
That is pretty nuts, I won't lie.
now, one thing I do notice is you put EXP up and Learner in Delete This, and I have them in Niche Application, and that honestly surprised me. I thought it would be the other way around.
Really? Because, see, here's the thing. Okay, so EXP up is 1.2 times normal XP forever. Learner is, if you're in the sub slot, you gain XP at the same rate as if you were in the main slot. I think this also applies to sub-pilots. I forget how exactly that works, but
I think it does.
The important thing is that for me, because of how the experience calculator works, where when you're under level, you get more XP, I rarely find any ability that affects experience does more than give you about 0.8 of a level over someone who doesn't have it, because the low level XP welfare will drag you along anyway. I can see applications where it might be worthwhile, but not many, and I would delete it over just about anything we have listed up to this point.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I haven't listed niche applications specifically because there are some characters like Kusuha and Rio who are late bloomer types, and if you want to use them, then letting them be in... Hello, Casey. Yes, you don't need to be nuzzling my microphone, thank you. My cat decided to come and say hello. With characters like that who need to become over-leveled and aren't really that good until they start getting over-levels, because they only start getting good growth after 50, but you will probably finish the game by then. If you want to make use of them, then the combination of XP up and Learner can help keep them on the field and gaining experience. They also do stack with Cheer, I think. Let me just double check that, but I think it does. It does not say. I think EXP up stacks with... I would hope it does, but assuming that it does, like you will get an insane amount of experience from shooting down someone like Shu if you have like Cheer cast, and you can gain... At that point, the extra 20% becomes really noticeable, because you gain like 3 to 4 more levels than you would have. It's really stupid. But yeah. Like if you aren't going to do that, then no.
Yeah, unless you're specifically using a late bloomer, which, I mean, I do use Rio, so that's not out of the question for me, but like...
Rio's bases are really good as well, and like does he have Predict to start with? I'm pretty sure he has one of either XP up or Learner, and then he has Telekinesis, and I think Predict to begin with.
Sounds right.
Yeah, like his bases and his skills are so good that it doesn't matter that he's a late bloomer, like he's just a good character. He's not like protagonist level, and he's let down by lack of having a really good unit, although the Lion F that he joins with is like ridiculously good for some reason.
It's so good. I was using that all the way to endgame because
it's so crazy how good it is, since you kill like 1 million of them and then you get one, and it's like, oh.
It's a guest fence that flies and has slightly better stats and comes with 2 free units of upgrades for all fields. Yeah. There's literally only things to like about it.
It's really funny to me just how good it is for no reason. So that leaves... Okay, niche use. We've gone over XP up and Learner, so let's talk about mechanic and resupply, right? Because they're kind of two sides of the same coin. So mechanic is pretty simple. When you use repair, you repair an extra 20% HP. Repair in this game isn't as good as it is in like Z2, where it's, you cast repair and someone gains like 3000 HP. In this, repair will raise it to, usually it's about 1500-ish, isn't it?
I want to say I usually see 1680. So
Yeah.
you're in the right
So-
ballpark.
It's enough to top up a unit, but it's not really enough to like fully heal someone, unlike in later games. I think, honestly, it's not that good, which is probably why I got massively buffed in later games, and in Z2, like, repairing is better than shooting, which is insane.
Yeah.
And resupply lets you resupply, use resupply after moving, so that's the standard resupply action. It docks 10 will from the recipient, but it restores all of their energy and ammo. Resupply, like being able to resupply after moving, is actually amazing. The issue is that first of all, you have to actually equip the resupply unit on something to use it. Second, you have to give up that unit's turn. And third, if you were bringing a unit that you were like specifically planning on doing like mechanic and resupply things with, you were probably going to put a spellcaster in them, and they probably have resupply as a spell. So it's kind of... It's niche.
So here's the deal with resupply. You buy it on Rada, because I don't believe she gets resupply via skill, and she will be alive to use it. And that's the entirety of you buying resupply.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you can do it on like other dedicated spellcaster units like Garnet, or something I'm fond of doing on Kyosuke's route is if you put Russell in a plane, he actually makes a really good mechanic and resupply bot, because he wasn't going to do a lot of damage anyway, but his defense is so stupidly good that he can actually still take hits for people in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
But like at that point, like, it's niche. Like, that's why it's here. I do think, like, being able to resupply without spending SP and after moving is really good, especially if you aren't, like, really riding your positioning. Okay, so in OG2, there's a map where you have to get everyone across a line within, like, 8 turns or so, and you start off over water, and then, like, the battlefield is all ruined, so you have terrible movement on the ground. And I failed that map because my Latuni had not enough energy left to fly over the line, and not enough movement on the ground to move over the line, because I left her one panel out of range of a resupply. But, I remember that. I don't remember much else about the other, 9 times I beat OG2 on GBA, but that stuck with me because it's really stupid. If you don't do dumb things like that, then I think the value of resupply is much lower. If you aren't as good at keeping track of where everything is, then I think resupply is actually much better.
I would agree with that.
Mechanic is almost certainly going on a dedicated spellcaster though, because if they don't do anything else that turn, then having them just be able to move and heal at the end of the turn is good.
Exactly.
So yeah, niche application. It's not amazing on its own, but it's one of those things that if you put it on something that you weren't going to be using to attack with anyway, then having them spend their turn repairing isn't bad, and so repairing more is good.
Exactly.
And that brings us down to the bottom tier, which is all of the morale skills. Oh, we didn't talk about SP up. Okay, it gives you more SP. It's really good on people who cast a lot of spells.
It ups your SP. What's to talk about?
It's pretty. The thing about it though is, the reason it's niche is mostly because it takes up a skill slot, right? So, for characters that are mostly spellcasters, then SP up is really obvious. For characters that you want on the front line, you have to find, you have to work really hard to find a slot to put SP up in. which is the main thing. Like, you don't just put it on everyone.
Unlike SP regen, which is great.
Yeah, pretty much. You could make an argument that SP up and SP regen are kind of working at cross purposes, but because so many of the good like support spells cost so much, like Faith is 40, Enable is what, 60?
Enable is 60 usually.
Hope is like
resupply is 50 or 60 usually.
Yeah, so having more SP and regenerating it will give you more casts of those over turns because you have like a bigger buffer before you start running out of SP. So, you know, it's good on sub-pilots, it's good on spellcasters. If you are at a complete loss to buy a skill, then, and like you've already bought everything that you think makes a unit good, then SP up will never be a bad choice because having more SP is just always good. But it's not something that you would usually put on everyone.
So
and
now
that brings us to which is all of the skills that improve your morale gain, which is, I know, sounds kind of weird because at the start we were like, morale is really good, but the way that morale works, so morale, the skill, is +5 morale when you sortie. The thing is, for
it's
most units,
+2 per player phase after turn 2.
Isn't that resolve?
You're thinking of no, resolve is +5 at the start.
Okay, I'm wrong. Resolve is +5 at the start of each scenario, which like sounds good, but for a lot of units, it doesn't put them in range of doing anything that they couldn't already do. So many people get like Spirit or Drive, which gives them 10 or 30 morale straight away. All the units that are aced get a morale bonus when they deploy, which is all of them by the end game, especially in OGs, because you still only need, what is it, 50 kills to get ace, and there are more enemy units now than there were in GBA. So like you can have units being aced by the time that you get into the bit with the Wrath Joint, which gives you +5 morale bonus and extra money, and your top ace, so the character that has the most kills, gets +10 morale instead. So the extra +5 to start with isn't as good as it seems, and
there are characters for whom it works. Like there are some cases where the 5 from being aced and the 5 from resolve will enable something on turn 1 that it will.
They're pretty far and few between. I will say it is for characters that use barriers, because barriers typically switch on at 110 morale. It can be useful in that circumstance, but it's not more useful than pretty much any other skill you can buy.
Yeah. Also, in almost every stage, there's enough trash that you will turn on the barrier by the time you need it.
Yeah, that's true as well. It's pretty, like, I mean, the R-Gun is probably the only unit that is both fragile and relies on morale to get its barrier up, and its barrier is actually like really relevant to it. It's like, I mean, the R1 isn't exactly tanky, but Ryusei has a high TK level, which adds to the barrier, and he has Invincible, so like once a turn he just doesn't take damage.
He also has Alert, doesn't he? Which means you can total bag him defensively.
Let me check. I think he gets... oh crap. Let's see. No, but he starts with Focus. So between that and his good stats and TK, and then Invincible and TK Barrier, he just doesn't have survivability issues. And he has a good morale type as well. So like, the thing about morale gains as well is that most characters will gain between 1 or 2 morale anytime they partake in any interaction or anytime the enemy gets shot down. So if the enemy's opening sally is like, 5 twin units of like trash, however, then everyone will get like 10 morale just from them being shot down, and the people who interacted with them will get even more. So you don't need like morale bonuses that start that much.
Yeah.
And so on that subject, so that's what I say. That's resolve.
Realistically, that just covered everything that gives you morale.
Yeah. So like
all of the same complaints apply to all of them.
Yeah, the morale plus skills aren't really that good to begin with, and And if there was a morale plus miss, I could potentially see a case for that, because pilots with easygoing would get +4 morale whenever they missed, and lots of them have like high damage, low accuracy attacks, so that would maybe be niche, but everything else, it's just kind of like you don't need it. It just takes up a skill slot. Like, getting extra
Yeah, I
morale is
would agree.
nice, but... And then we have morale, which is the worst skill in the game. Like, the other skills are bad, but morale is really, really bad. Morale is the one that KT mentioned earlier. Starting from the second player phase, the pilot gets +2 morale every turn. Like, that's one interaction with an enemy. It's so terrible.
It's the worst. I cannot imagine why it costs more than revenge and actual victory.
Yeah, it's really bizarre. I think it's because they were still kind of in like old morale gains mode, where morale went up really slowly, and so they hadn't really thought about it
Yeah,
that much.
if you're playing like F or 4, morale takes forever to go up, and things being locked to 110 is a big deal.
Yeah,
OG is not that kind of game.
yeah. So, like, I mean, even for stuff like the other stuff that we have in Elite this tier, we came up with things that you could use it for, but not this one. Like, to make it even worse, like, there were only 2 characters that you could have made a case for it in OG2, which are Ring and Gilliam, who, as a joke, have the Super Wars F morale gains, which made them terrible. But Gilliam is so good that he doesn't really give a shit about what his morale is. The only reason that you would care about something like this is so that you could get him to like a finisher more quickly. And then Ring has drive, so like it doesn't matter that she has bad morale gains because she just goes to 130 on turn 1.
Gilliam will take care of himself, especially because he has, as I recall, Excel and Focus and huge numbers, so he's going to kill things all on his own and get 2 big morale numbers despite his crappy gains.
Yeah, in OG1, he comes with Predict, Attacker, Hit and Away, and SP regen, and he gets Sense for some ridiculously low value. I don't think it's 10 SP, but it's like 15 or 20. It's really stupid. And his ace bonus is final evasion rate plus 15, so like he doesn't need to cast spells to live, he can just be there.
Yeah.
And
So
that brings us to...
wraps us up.
It does, so we'll do like a pilot. I don't know if I'll make it a tier list, but definitely like a pilot guide soonish, because we were talking about this. I was originally thinking like we should do a pilot guide, and the reason for that is that you can pretty much look at a unit and be like, oh, this unit does this. But for pilots, it's kind of a lot more complicated, because what pilot stats and skills and so on do is more obfuscated from the player. And if you put like a bad pilot in a good unit, then it kind of is okay, but there is a marked difference in performance depending on the pilot, and if you don't realize that, then you will have the kind of OG1 experience that I did when I played on GBA, and you will hard reset at the Argano Valley and go and play Fire Emblem.
Yeah.
Like, I had to restart my whole game because I couldn't get past the Argano Valley. I didn't know that you could grind experience and stuff.
I almost had to do that last time. I can't remember how I weaseled my way out of it. I think it was just setting myself up to have more hits of Rampage Ghost. Just orienting the entire map around, let's see how many times we can swing with Rampage Ghost, and increasing that number until it was viable.
It's really rough on Kurisuke Rat as well, because everything else on the map is like the unmanned drone units, which you need to use focus and so on to hit. And then Ingram shows up, and he's not only like insanely hard to hit, but the Rivale is really buff, and it has a really good barrier, and it hits hard, and it has huge HP regen. I'm pretty sure he has Prevail. Like, by far the hardest boss in the game.
That's right.
Okay, so yeah, that wraps us up. thank you, Katie, for joining me, because doing this on my own would have been really bad, and you play the game really differently than me, so being able to talk about it is, I think, a lot more informative.
Yeah, because we have pretty much diametrically opposed playstyles, insofar as they can be opposed and you can still win in Super Robot Wars, because, like, to a point,
Yeah.
the game is coercive, but
Yeah.
things can
Okay.
vary.
So, just to round up, if you didn't know there was a localization patch for this game that was posted last year, that's part of why I decided to do a roundup, because the game is way more accessible now. And on modern tech, you can play the game a lot more easily. I'll put a link to it in the description, and you can find Katie's Twitch, where she normally streams, in the description as well. I stream more sporadically because I have to like block out time around my life. Yeah, I think that's everything.
A standalone
So,
person who can do whatever they want.
yeah, pretty much. So, yeah, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you guys next time we do one of these vids.